at a critical era in the nation's historical development. Now, although many have raised questions whether the Diamond Anniversary is worth celebrating or not, many Nigerians, especially those who experienced the Civil War, would readily affirm that there are reasons for celebrating. Now, what with the unity of purpose to keep the land safe for future generations? This is the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority as we continue with the celebration of Nigeria at 60. I have in the studio two gentlemen to analyze the issues. Professor Mohammed Kabir Yusuf is from the Communications Department, Nile University, Abuja, and Mr. Paddy Ezeala, a Communications and Development Specialist. Gentlemen, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
We'll also join our Maiduguri and Enugu studios for more analysis at the appropriate time, but let's start off here in Abuja. And gentlemen, at the risk of overstating it, why should we celebrate? Why shouldn't we celebrate, Professor Kabir?
Well, you've already put everything together. I wish you would just ask why should we celebrate. But when you say why should we celebrate and why shouldn't we celebrate, then you're confusing me. But the issue is that we've been independent for the past 60 years, right? And what it's clear to me is that we have not been able to actually sit down and ask ourselves, what does that independence mean to us as a people? What do we want to do with it? Then, where do we want to go? What are the milestones? How do we know if we reach halfway? How do we know if we're making progress? And how do we assess that progress and know what are the methodologies that we need to change so that we reach our destination? It seems to us that as a nation, we did not have been able to sit down and have that conversation. And the problem is that no matter how long it takes, we still have to come back and have that conversation, because no matter what we put in place, if we don't have a central thesis of what we want to do with this country, those things would not have any concrete meaning to us. They would not have any concrete meaning to the generations coming until we have that central thesis. And for us to have that central thesis, we have to have that national conversation. What does the independence mean to us? And what do we want to do with it? Where are we going to as a nation? And if you look at you come to discuss it, the speech of Mr. President about the independence, that is what you will see. About 51 points about disjointed issues that are not really coming together to form a thesis, right? And that, I think, is our starting point. And until we have that, celebrating independence would not mean that much.
You talk about a national conference, but many would argue we've had so many conferences, national conference, in whatever name you want to call them. So
we do have many, but what I am saying we didn't have is a consensus about what we want to do with the country. Many a times that we had the conferences, we've been talking about what part of the resources goes to who and to which part of the country. That is not having a unified conversation about the country. That is still talking about sectarianism. That is still talking about our regions. That is still talking about our tribes. That is still talking about the parts of the country that we came from. That is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a situation whereby someone from Kano and someone from Enugu will look at themselves as Nigerians trying to find a common destiny for themselves.
Okay.
Not trying to have some separate,
All right, we'll take up some issues that certainly would arise from that. But let's come to Paddy Ezeala.
Well, we have to celebrate. We have to mark the independence. The whole thing is that the celebration will be as a kind of introspection. We have to assess what has happened. We have to be able to look at it holistically, see where have we been able to succeed, where have we had failures and challenges, and what are the next steps. In togetherness, that's what the word I choose to use. We are together. There are some issues to be addressed, but I've never seen these issues as issues that we lack the capacity to handle. constitutional conference, whatever conference you call it, they were all happening before even independence. It's an ongoing thing. Even if you choose to have one now, that doesn't preclude the fact that there will be another one to take place afterwards, while we move towards making things better. At the same time, Nigeria has to celebrate because we are still together as a country, as I pointed out. Then in foreign policy, we have scored points here and there. We are a dominant force in West Africa. We've stabilized the region. Right from time, Africa has been the centerpiece of Nigeria's foreign policy, and the world acknowledges that. Democracy, we've been here for 21 years as a stretch. And all the problems that emanate from the inadequacy of the constitution or some politicians not doing what they're supposed to do and things like that, they are not intractable problems. They can still be handled. And if we wake up and say, identify the issues and holistically address them pointedly, I think we'll be able to come out of it. Then, are you going to talk about Nigeria celebrating independence? It's not about government alone. It's not about economy alone. In the areas of arts, we have done very well. Culture, we've done very well. Sports, we've done very well. So as a country, I have every reason to be proud as a Nigerian, and at the same time recognize the fact that there are issues to be addressed, and also note that we have the capacity to address these issues. We shouldn't run away from them. Any day we wake up and face them frontally, squarely, we are going to address them. I hope it doesn't take long before we wake up.
Does it detract from it all to say that after 60 years of independence, the talk is majorly about hope? Some who argue say, well, at 60, it shouldn't be a matter of hope now.
Yeah.
It should be about moving to establish the true position of the country.
Yes, when the president read his address, a response came from Professor Jega, the former INEC chairman, said that it is now time to operationalize, to make these speeches start working. He was talking to both the Nigerian people and the government. It's time to do so. We also use this program to make a call for us to wake up and address some of these issues that paint a picture of uncertainty. A lugubrious picture that frightens at some time. At some moments. But as I said earlier, I have not seen any issue, any problem that has arisen in Nigeria that is intractable, that is beyond us, considering our capacity and potential. The word potential has been used since independence. Nigeria has great potential. Nigeria is a capable country with intellectuals, all kinds of interests, all kinds of capabilities in all spheres. But what have we been able to do with it? You cannot put the blame squarely on the various governments. Nollywood was not created by the government. Nigerians created it and have taken it to another level. Even at that, we are still praying that it's going to move to even a greater level. Can even sustain this economy, this Nigerian economy? It happens in India and other places. But the government, as a body that should incentivize action, create the enabling environment for things to work, should do more. And the people should also learn to get things right. Followership has a pattern. Followership should be constructive, should be productive. While we expect the government to do more than they are doing now. And democracy we are talking about should be the democracy that inheres, that accommodates the mechanisms for correction, for change, for growth. That's the kind of democracy we are looking at. No two democracies are the same. No constitution is perfect. Understand that. So we as Nigerians should identify areas we have to build on, the areas we have to drop, even in our attitude as human beings.
All right. Well, 60 together. That's the theme. Time to look back and see if the founding fathers had been driven by more patriotism than modern day leaders.
Well, 60 together, are we really together? That is the question I keep asking. Are we really together? And that is what I mean when I'm talking about us coming together to really have that ideology that binds us together. I'm happy that Mr. Paddy here is talking about having the capacity to be able to solve our problems. But how comes we are not using that capacity that we have? That is a critical question that I think we should be asking. And I would say that the reason why we have not been able to be using the capacity is because we don't know what to do with it. I mean, we have to have this definition. We have to have this definition of who we are as a people at the ideological level. We have to have it at the cultural level. We have still not been able to come together and fuse our different cultures to form one indivisible culture that we can proudly call Nigerian culture. You're talking about Nollywood, and we have Kannywood, and we have all these film industries which are doing fantastically well. But to what extent are they helping in bringing the different parts of the country coming together? Like, for example, it's only in Nigeria that you have different film industries. In India, you have only one, right? In the US, you have only one film industry. In Nigeria, you have different kind of film industries. What does that tell you? That tells you that you are operating different nations within one country. That is what tells me, at least. So when we are talking about patriotism, I will quite agree with you that our founding fathers have a high level of patriotism that I don't think we have been able to imbibe. We are kind of retrogressing. Instead of moving, they have been able to come together and form the country. But instead of us coming out of our cocoon to come and really make it work as a single country with the same ideology, the same worldview, we have different worldviews, right? We are together, but are we really together?
One thing I've always asked is who can explain it? And it's a phenomenon that is real. When Nigerians are outside the shores of this country, they're fired by some form of togetherness. You must have witnessed that at some point in time.
I love the fact that you brought that up.
What is responsible for that? And
I love the fact that you brought that up. Because I think what makes them really do well when they are outside of the shores of this country is because they had a sense of purpose for the first time in their lives, which they lost in their country. In their country, you keep walking, and what you end up realizing is just probably, if you've been able to live a good life, that at the end of the day, you keep asking yourself, for what reason? Is this life all about just being able to live well, have a good car, good house, and train kids, and that's it? You see, so unless we have that national conversation that I'm talking about, we can't have that sense of purpose. And that sense of purpose is what will keep driving you as an individual, as a community, as a state, as a nation, because you know that you have a destination to reach. Look, greatness of countries is not in the fact that they are the greatest country in the region within which they exist, but in the fact that they can be able to be one. If we are, for example, the giant of Africa, like we are fond of calling ourselves, then what else? But if we know that we have the capacity to be the leading force in Africa, then we'll put all hands on deck to be able to reach that. So we have to have a definite place that we want to go to as a country. And if we reach there, then set another goal for ourselves, set another goal for ourselves, and set another goal for ourselves, which all of us will agree to and agree to work for. That is the logic, and that is the key. But as long as we keep doing some disjointed activities, I mean, the things we are talking about as a marker for our progress and development, all of them, if you look at them critically, are things that we can achieve without having to call ourselves Nigeria. Like, for example, Nollywood will still be possible without the country called Nigeria. Kannywood will still be possible without the country called Nigeria. Most of the things that you talk about, they will still be possible. I'm looking for that thing that can only be possible because we are Nigeria.
Yeah.
Unity in diversity.
Yes. Yeah, you hinted at it when you talked about the Kannywood. Why? No, you should look at it from a positive point of view. We are diverse. You know, even before Nigeria had independence, it was recognized that this is a diverse country. But you have to kind of harness the diversity for growth, for unity, for national development. I don't have any problem with Kannywood. I try to watch the ones that are subtitled, follow it up. I lived in Senegal where all kinds of traditional things happen. They don't even put in French, you know. They do it in their native Wolof, and I try to follow. It's okay. It enriches us more. We shouldn't see it as a centrifugal development that is tearing us apart. I love Kannywood, I love Nollywood, I want others to spring up. But there should be that unifying factor, you know, exchange of ideas. That brought about the youth service where we were in the East, people come, we stack up at the teacher's house, do things like that. We're happy with that. You know, one of my regrets today is not speaking as many Nigerian languages as possible as I should have been speaking. You know, that would have made me a better human being, a more acceptable human being. So that's the kind of culture we should be able to bring down to the children, particularly, since we are already across areas. So that is the way I look at it. He also hinted at Nigerians outside, when they bond together as Nigerians, that united make more progress and all. What is it in Nigeria that is separating us and bringing us down? When we started the discussion, I talked about introspection. We have to look inwards. What is it that is the problem? You may even have 20 constitutional conferences and still realize that you've not been able to solve all these problems. We have to ask ourselves some questions. Do we really love? You cannot love the country if you don't love yourself. You cannot love a country when you don't love your children and bother about what future your children are going to face. So that is where it starts from. So we have to, National Orientation Agency was set up in a lot of agencies. Nigeria has done very well in the area of government agencies, up to 900. I don't know whether there is any country in the world that can compete with Nigeria in setting up agencies. The next question is, are these agencies living up to expectation? Are they doing what they're supposed to do? It's really high time we started addressing that issue so that we do the right things at the right time and have internal mechanisms to monitor performance and growth. Otherwise, we'll just be beating about the bush.
All right, we did say at the start of this program that we'll link up with all the centers, and I'd like to say that joining us from Maiduguri is Professor Ibrahim Umara of the University of Maiduguri, and we'd like to welcome you to this special program on the 60th anniversary of Nigeria's independence. Professor Umara, thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon, Cyril. I have to correct that I'm Professor Joe Onyekure and I'm speaking from Enugu and not Maiduguri. Let us discuss the issue of Nigeria's independence, which of course we know we got in 1960. And before the independence, we had some problems, which of course were indigenous to Nigeria. So going by that situation.
Yes, go ahead. We will, not to worry.
Independence on October 1, 1960. So the pre-independent Nigeria was fraught with so many difficulties. Of course, the founding fathers, Right Honorable Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, the Chief Bafemi Awolowo, and Sadam of Sokoto, these were founding fathers who fought for the Nigerian independence. And of course, these people were at their young ages. I remember in his own words, Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe stated that he put in about 35 years of his age in trying to fight for Nigeria's independence. And it didn't matter to him whether it was him or Chief Awolowo or Sadam of Sokoto who will emerge as the prime minister. And of course, when that happened in 1960, Nigeria became independent and he became the first indigenous governor general. Of course, that lasted for 3 years before we had the Westminster style of government, which of course had him as the titular head of state or president and Tafawa Balewa as the prime minister. So some of these things continue on until we had the first military coup in 1966. This plagued Nigeria until when we had the first democratically elected president in 1979. So some of these teething problems remained in Nigeria and became endemic. And of course, remember that Nigeria is a multinational country, of course, with over 250 ethnic groups and over 500 languages. It is difficult for people to cohabit, without any problem whatsoever. But despite all these difficulties, Nigeria continued to coast along these difficulties. Of course, the issue of who was allochthonous and who was autochthonous came into being. Of course, the issue of ethnocentric Nigerians, came to play. But of course, Nigeria is a country that is very, very resilient in all its activities. And we know that with all these difficulties, Nigeria has come out without any known problem, except for the civil war we had in 1970, which lasted for 30 months. But after that, Nigeria became stronger. But I will not say that these problems have not, persisted. They have persisted, but remember, there's no country that can have the kind of diversity Nigeria has and still remain as a country. But despite that, we continue to remain as a country. So I give kudos to Nigeria and Nigerians for this very feat. Nigeria and Nigerians.
Right, okay. You know, we started off this discussion here in Abuja talking about unity in diversity. What fires Nigerians when they're outside the country? What happens when they're in the country? Here you heard one of our guests say there's need for a conversation, and people have said, we've had so many conversations in the past. Is there no end to conversations? Within all the conversations, the conferences that have been held, would it be that the real issues have not been brought out?
Yes, Cyril, in fact, let me put it in perspective. There's no country that has no problem. Even the United States, one of the oldest democracies, has its own problems. Even right now, as the president of the United States has the coronavirus, and his wife also is afflicted with the same coronavirus. We have issues that has plagued, that have plagued the democracy of the United States and even their entire election process. So what I would say in a nutshell is that with Nigeria and its problems, it is not particular to Nigeria. But I think we continue to discuss. That is why even the Constitution of the United States continues to have amendments. So there's nothing wrong in Nigerian Constitution having amendments, because amendments are just procedural changes, that are attached as addendum to normal constitution. So if Nigeria continues to emerge with this diversity in culture, customs, and tradition, with all these attendant problems, there's always need to discuss so that we can understand ourselves better, because there's always one saying, be closer to your enemies than your friends. That way we will eliminate enmity completely. So issue of discussion should be on the table all the time.
Professor Jehu Onyekwere Nnaji joined us from Enugu. Yes, we wanted to link up with Professor Umara from Maiduguri, but we had Professor Onyekwere Nnaji from Enugu join us, so it's okay. Professor Umara will still join us from our Maiduguri studio, but this conversation is still within the realms of 60 years of Nigeria's independence and why the country has remained together and is staying together despite all the numerous challenges, things that have threatened the very fabric of the country's existence. There has to be something there.
Yeah, there has to be something there. It's like when you're married to your wife and then you had 3 or 4 kids and then you realize that you're not compatible, but you have to stay together for the sake of those kids. It looks to me very much like that. It's not that we are not compatible, but the thing is we refuse to acknowledge those differences as a necessity in life. When you come together with someone, you have to have those differences, even if you are identical twins. Acknowledge them, then move on. And because we have refused to do that, and I keep repeating the conversation as if that is the... It doesn't have to come in form of a conference. At individual levels, we have to... I love the fact that you're talking about retrospect.
Yeah.
We have to come back to ourselves and ask ourselves whether we really believe in this country the way it is with its diversity, which is a point of strength, not a point of weakness. We have to accept that at individual level, at community levels. I have to feel very comfortable being in Enugu just the way I'm being comfortable being in Kano or Zaria. Someone from Enugu has to be comfortable being in the old city of Kano, has to know that if I come here, I will blend with people, right? We have to get to that level for us to actually have the kind of country that we are dreaming of having. That's what I'm talking about. But now we are together and it's looking very much like a marriage of convenience, which it shouldn't be, right? It should be a marriage of love, not a marriage of convenience, and that's what I'm talking about. We should stop tolerating ourselves. We should integrate into one another. That's what I'm talking about. Beyond tolerance.
All right. Well, at this point, I guess, yes, Professor Ibrahim Umara from the University of Maiduguri, are you there now? Yes, I do apologize. We wanted to come to you earlier on, but it's good that you're coming at this time. You've had the benefit of listening to Professor Nnaji and the 2 guests we have here in the studio. So that puts you in a position to assess the argument so far and come in with your take.
Thank you very much. I think they are all in the right track and right direction. The problem with the country is our inability to come up with an acceptable political culture. The political culture in the first place is not properly entrenched, and that accentuated the political socialization processes. And in that misguided political socialization characterized by ethnic and regional jingoism, the Nigerian nation, particularly the people, stood shoulder to shoulder, they stood together. It is only the issue of diversionary politics, politics of constructing an identity to instrumentalize identity for people to creep into corridors of power that consistently create the problem. But if we can still overcome these differences of subnational loyalties and identities, I think it will be greater to us, as the federal government do have a sort of scheme, the National Youth Service Corps scheme, the federal institutions, the security and armed forces structures, all these have consolidated our nationhood, and then the commercial aspect, the trading aspect, the economic aspect, and perhaps the comparative advantages of each of the region is much more important in keeping the countries together. But what we need to have to also understand is that the people don't have anything on their own. The people are interdependent and interrelated with one another. And that a common man at Obeite market in Enugu is transporting palm oil to a common man in Maiduguri Monde market. And they did not see each other. They always engage in transaction of the particular commodities. They engage in transaction of the monetary aspects. Sometimes they visit Maiduguri, sometimes they visit Enugu. To them, there is nothing wrong on the economic and commercial realm. But in the political realm, when we always notice, once the electioneering campaign is approaching, I don't know what is wrong with the political elites. They now resort back to instrumentalizing ethnic, regional, and religious and differences for them to use it as an instrument of creeping into the corridors of power that always characterize the nation with a sort of tensional polarization that threatens our national security.
It's a good analogy that you've given, but let me take it further a step and say, yes, the trader from Enugu takes his palm oil to Maiduguri. He interacts with the man in the Maiduguri market, and they visit one another and they don't see anything wrong. But the political elite, as you say, comes up at the time of elections and whips up certain sentiments. So the question is, why don't the man from Enugu and the man from Maiduguri, who understand each other, who trade, why don't they say to the political elite, you can't do this, we get on fine. It's either you toe the line or we'll turn our backs.
That should be on the mobilizational aspect. The mobilizational capacity and the power of those that are instrumentalizing our diversities is so banal because they do control the media outlet, both electronics and print. And as a result of that, the process of public opinion formation in the country is greatly determined by some elites that tend to polarize the people. But if, on the other hand, these people should be given avenue, as in those days where people do have a sort of assembly across ethnic affinities, across religious affinities, across regional affinities, for them to come together, interact, and exchange ideas for them to have a common ground, I think is going to be very much greater. But for now, that opportunity was already missing and it has been lost. And the common man were now forced to believe that whatever the elites believe in are the most important thing. And therefore it is the elites that continue to manipulate them. It is the elite that use divide and rule technique in order to capture that power. And at last, whether it is the man from south or from the east, as a Muslim or as a Christian, once they are in the corridor of power, the situation with the common man remains the same without any changes. But in the process of capturing the power, they were now used and polarized. So the only way for these common men, or for these common people, the masses to mobilize is also should be the responsibilities of the government. Reactivate National Orientation Agency. Reactivate national programs with the national television outlet. The Nigerian Communication Commission, the Nigerian Broadcasting Commission should have to come with a program mandating the states and the private radio and television stations to be using this media outlet in order to homogenize the heterogeneity of the nation to bring them together. But for now, I think we are descending gradually into a deeply rooted animosity and distrust with one another. So it is very dangerous. Even at the primary school level, people are now beginning to see the differences along ethnic, regional, and tribal configuration. So the contours of conflict tend to identify people from in-group and I-group. So if this is not handled, and if the government did not handle that with utmost care, I think we are still sitting on a very huge time bomb. I'm happy the two colleagues have already talked about the ability of these film industries to homogenize the heterogeneity. I'm happy to hear that. But then when we carefully observe, the nature of their movie is highly regional, sectional, and it has very low element of national cohesion and integration. And I think Ministry of Information should stand up to that responsibility to ensure that these film industries are guided. They should have the national element, and they should be used as an avenue of homogenizing the heterogeneous nature of the country for us to understand one another, to accept our differences, to recognize and respect that this is our land. We have nowhere to go. We have to accept the fact that we are operating a federal system, and in federal states, each of these diversity have a sense of belonging, and therefore we should be carried along as a single nation.
All right. Thank you. Speaking of the national element, in its 60 years of independence, Nigeria has established a number of national institutions, one of them the Nigerian Army, and it is a symbol of strength and sovereignty and has been protecting Nigerians and Nigeria's territorial integrity against both internal and external aggression. This special report we're about to bring you is by Defense Correspondent Ismail Musa, who x-rays the major prospects and challenges of the Nigerian military as the nation marks 60 years of independence.
Nigeria's army predates the nation's independence in 1960. From a group of able youths assembled by John Glover in 1863 to protect the then British colony, the military transformed together with the sovereignty of Nigeria to become a strong, formidable fighting force, defending our territorial integrity.
The Nigerian army that at one time was of the 4th division is about 8 today. Part of the development is this center that you see today, and it is in line with global development. If you want to move on, you must do research, and that research leads to development.
Nigeria's 60 years journey of nationhood has been eventful, characterized by socio-economic prosperity and security challenges, on the other hand, that threaten the nation. It is an established fact that the military has played a critical role in sustaining Nigeria's unity, always coming in handy to contain ethno-religious and political crises that threaten the nation's unity and diversity.
This country has come to stay. Apart from the political unity, the cultural unity, the historical affiliation, the economic bonds that have existed within the different parts and amongst the different parts of the country, everything will be done possible by the grace of God.
The Tiv riots, civil war, Metasine crisis, militancy, and the emerging global monster, terrorism, readily come to mind.
In the fight against terrorism and insurgency, they have done marvelously well, because in other militaries, in other armies, take for instance Colombia, had to contend with the issue of terrorism and insurgency with the FARC for over 58 years. And we know what is happening in Somalia, what is happening in other parts of the world like Afghanistan, Iraq, and the rest of them. But within a space of limited time, the military was able to decisively deal with these issues And I think it's something that we should be proud of.
Currently, the military is involved in facilitating internal security challenges in almost all states of the Federation, employing civil-military relations to court support of the citizens. Nigeria's military has for long been noted globally for its role in peacekeeping, especially the stability it has brought in West African region. From being a dependent on foreign soft and hardware for its operations, the Nigerian military has become producer of some of them, cutting costs and offering opportunity to Nigerian investors. There is an increasing optimism amongst the military and the citizens alike that in the next 60 years, Nigerian military will be the pride of not only the nation but the global community. Ismail Musa, NTA News.
Okay, from the military to the civilian force, and the Nigeria police force has often been in the eye of the storm for various reasons. But regardless of this, the police force has played an important role in Nigeria's evolution from independence to date in entrenching order, legality, development, and democracy. Francis Form in this report takes a look at the Nigeria police force from 1960 to date in fulfillment of its constitutional mandate.
The police exist to provide internal security in the nation. Prior to independence, Nigeria only had a native police whose performance during major political developments was adjudged not too good enough, and that gave rise to a national police, today known as the Nigeria Police Force. Constitutionally, the Nigeria Police Force is the main organ tasked with managing internal security in the country. Its responsibilities include ensuring the prevention and detection of crime, apprehension of offenders, preservation of law and order, and the protection of lives and property. From independence to the successive military regimes, the crime appeared limited to armed robbery and political uprising.
The police force during the Civil War was, played a very, prominent role too. They were the first set of, intervention force that they sent out to go and see how they could quell the situation, the uprising.
This country should be grateful to the Nigerian Police Force because the Nigerian Police Force have done a lot from independence to date to ensure that this country remain one.
The institution that you have every ethnic nationality represented and they are spread all over the country.
However, as the nation became more populated, the challenge of policing also increased. This led to the development of a more inclusive community policing strategy that will help in addressing some of the security challenges.
The whole essence is for people to be part and parcel of their own security, to participate in the provision of their own security.
In Nigeria's democratic governance, the Nigeria Police has helped to entrench the democratic culture.
If we are talking about performance of the police with regards to contributing to the development of democracy in Nigeria, I think the police has fared well, particularly in recent time. I'm glad to say that what happened in Edo is a good example. The police was independent.
So what we did in Edo was enforceable. We created a level playing field for everybody, for the Nigerians to be able to go out there and vote whoever they wanted to vote.
The launch of Operation Puff Adder by the current Inspector General of Police has recorded some success story in the fight against kidnapping, armed robbery, banditry, and communal violence. Another success story by the police is in the area of funding and procurement of the much-desired state-of-the-art equipment to tackle insecurity.
We're making arrangements to ensure that a lot of intervention is given with the funds that is coming into the trust fund to improve the services of the police in this country and to ensure that adequate provision is given to provide security of lives and property.
officers and men of the force have participated in different peacekeeping operations, with more than 12,000 veteran peacekeepers awarded UN letters of commendation and medals for outstanding performances during their tour of duty. The Nigeria Police Force has had a total of 20 Inspectors General of Police, with Louis Edets, the first indigenous IGP. These former IGPs have introduced various strategies in an effort to rid the nation of all forms of criminal elements. For a police force that has gone through thick and thin to date, challenges are a necessary future.
When there is a military regime, we subordinate everything we have, to them, and that has affected the way that we have policed the system.
However, the current leadership of the force is not resting on its oars, as it is doing everything possible to reduce crime to the barest minimum, while maintaining friendly relations with the public. In Abuja, Frank Sisform, NTA News.
Thank you, Francis. Well, in its 60 years of independence, one of the biggest challenges Nigeria has faced, of course, would be that of security. At this point, we are being joined by another guest in our Maiduguri studio, and he is Ambassador Ahmed Shehu, who is Chairman Network for Civil Society Organizations in Borno State. Ambassador Ahmed Shehu, thanks for joining us.
Very much, it's my pleasure.
Right, one of the biggest challenges, and many people point to this as one of the biggest drawbacks in 60 years of independence, is the question of security. Yes, Nigeria has established national institutions, security organs like the military and the police. You've just seen special reports on how they've carried out their constitutional functions. So, is the security aspect of Nigeria's 60 years something to really worry about?
Thank you for these very important questions. Happy Independence Anniversary to our viewers. Well, to answer your question straight is whatever comment we need to make, we have to reflect and then look at what is the state of the security situation and then the apparatus from time immemorial. The long years of the military era has really contributed to the state of our security situation here. What I'm trying to say here is there are a lot of neglect, and you have to even correlate it with the factors that even introduce this insecurity, especially in the Northeast. The long years of military dictatorship has ensured that the level of good governance, transparency and accountability is missing, and this has directly affected every strata in the society, especially including the security aspect of it. So having said that, the civil society that I'm representing have been playing a very important role toward bringing conversation to the table, toward especially the presence of both national and international actors here in the region has ignited a lot of conversation, and this has really made the security apparatus to step up their games, and at times also they provide an enabling ground for us to discuss and then improve. And despite that, from the community is the military are really trying their best. A lot of improvement, the federal government is trying a lot of infrastructures, but what we are trying to say here is the security forces need to be motivated, the strategy need to be revisited, and the civil society and then the community voice need to be listened to in order to ensure that we can have a very peaceful Northeast and then Nigeria in general.
Well, Nigeria went through the throes of a civil war, and after it decided to build and stay together. But when the security challenges, particularly in the Northeast, came in, the insurgency, it was something new, and Nigeria's security agencies were not used to the kind of war that they now found themselves in. Now, the question here is, Nigerians as a people, have they given the necessary backing to their security agencies to surmount the insurgency and the challenges of the Northeast?
Actually, I can say yes, and I have to relate it to also the Constitution. The Constitution of Nigeria has given the people, the citizens, the fundamental freedom and then the right for self-explanation, expressing their opinion, or even how to hold their leaders accountable in that. And the citizens are taking every advantage of this. And here it comes the questions about good governance and then the security. At times there is contradiction and there is a clash between the right of the citizens and then between the national security. Compared to this, I can say the citizens are given that. I will speak from the northeast part of the country, especially Borno, of which we represent. At times the narrative from the public domain that the communities are not being cooperative to the security agencies, I think, is far from the truth in that aspect. What the communities are doing is sometimes there are compromises, sometimes people become a bit concerned about even divulging or giving out security information to people, because at times it really backfire when you cooperate and then you tend to release some sensitive information. But there are gradual improvement, and that's why we are advocating for people to create a forum where the communities, the citizens, and then the security agencies can sit down together to plan the security architecture in the country. For that, if we can have that, there's going to be speedy security, peace, and then justice in the country.
All right, thank you very much. Let's bring you in here, Mr. Ezeala. And the security situation, it was something at a point in time, I recall that years back, no one would believe that any day would come when there would be an insurgency in this country.
It's a very serious matter. That's the one area we have not done very well. If we cannot protect ourselves, then that's a very big challenge. There is need to look inwards. Earlier we said that there is no problem confronting Nigeria that we lack the capacity to confront. Now, is it that the various agencies that we have, security agencies, are not capable? I doubt that. Is it that they are not well equipped? We have to look into that. Is it that they are not well trained? We have to look into that. Is it that the numbers are not adding up? They are not many. We have to look into that, because it has wider implications. The economy cannot never be well if there is insecurity. The tourism industry cannot function if there is insecurity. We Nigerians cannot even move around if there is insecurity. We have to identify that and take this security issue very, very seriously. You talked about national dialogue. I think security should be part and parcel of this dialogue. How do we protect ourselves? I talk dialogue, yes, but dialogue is not an end in itself. It's a means to an end. But we must look at it. A situation whereby you cannot go to Maiduguri easily, you cannot go to Kaduna easily, you cannot. No country functions like that. We have to identify it as a very serious issue and tackle it. Not apportion blames, not run anybody down. It is a national issue. And we should also, as a country, learn to create a culture where high premium is placed on human lives. We are losing that in Nigeria. People shoot anyhow. People kill anyhow. Killing anyhow doesn't guarantee security. It worsens the matter. It breeds desperation. Security has gone beyond wielding heavy weapons and all that. There are many ways, intelligence, many ways of handling it. The professionals will tell us that. But we are not doing very well in that regard. And it has wider implications. It affects several spheres. What of the environment? People say, I come to a program, I don't mention the environment. Nigeria has lost more than 40 million hectares of forest since 1960. With wildlife and everything gone. These insurgents, these bandits are living in the forests, destroying Nigeria's landscape. Some of these Nigerian forests and what I'm talking about are contiguous with many countries. We have forests in Kainji Lake that dovetails into Benin Republic. We have the one in Chad Basin into Cameroon and Chad. We have the one into crossover into Cameroon that have become national security threats because they are not properly manned. So we have to have this dialogue we have been talking about and enrich dialogue that opens the way for further dialogue and correcting various things that are wrong with this country. We have to kind of sit up, both as government and as individuals. Things are really bad, especially with regard to security.
Okay, let's see if we can get Professor Onyekwere Nnaji, who is in Enugu Center. Professor Nnaji is a professor of international law and global politics. Well, Prof, the question of terrorism and insurgency is a global one, and at some point in time, terrorism came to the shores of Nigeria, and this is one thing the country has had to grapple with in recent years. Coming out of a civil war, no victor, no vanquished, trying to forge a developed nation, and somewhere along the line, terrorism came in. How have we done? How have we handled that? Have we empathized with the authorities as they tried to put down insurgency and terrorism?
Yes, let me try to x-ray the situation from the beginning till now. Before the presence of insurgency in Nigeria, we had armed robbery and all associated crimes. But of course, we should know that there's no country that's an Eldorado. Every country has its own problems that are peculiar to the country. So for Nigeria, we have this insurgency as a new type of war. And the Civil War of 1967 to 70 was a normal war, which is bilateral in nature, if you like. Two opposing parts are fighting each other. But again, in the case of insurgency, it's an amorphous and very difficult war, which does not follow the pattern of war. And in fact, as people will like to know, there are laws governing warfare. And when these wars are fought outside the boundaries of the norms, they become disingenuous and they are no longer in line with war factor. So now, let me put it again in perspective. These insurgent groups have had their own splinter groups over time. And as much as possible, I will commend the Nigerian military and the police as being very efficient. Of course, we know the Nigerian military is the best in Africa. There's no doubt about that. And the Nigerian police has been doing very, very effectively well in this very regard. But of course, like I said before, these insurgents do not follow a pattern of warfare. They divide so many methods that they can use, or devise so many methods they use to fight this warfare, which are not in line with normal warfare. And it's difficult to stem them in their tide. So what will happen is that the indigents or the citizens in this country should also collaborate with the military authorities and the police to tip off the police when they see anything. Like there's a common balance, police is your friend. So that means that if you have anything, if you see something, say something. But people, when they connive at these very odd things, it's difficult to stem this very tide, stymie the level of insurgency in this country. So again, let me put it again in perspective. The Nigerian military have done very well according to the information we have seen earlier on individuals, and the police also have also done very well. So, but of course, there is need to up their ante, to up their game in terms of the amorphous warfare which these insurgents have, used over time. So, like we see in the northeast and elsewhere around Nigeria, these insurgents have developed these very strategies to try to thwart the normal military, approach. But despite that, the military is doing enough to make sure that this very action is stymied in the process of development.
All right. There's an interesting angle to this all that Mr. Isiala brought up, and he was talking about the environment. Most times people talk about just the loss of territories, or which have been reclaimed by the military. They talk about loss of livelihoods, and of course, the very serious aspect of loss of lives. But he has brought up the question of the environment, and not many people have given it enough thought to say these insurgents and bandits are destroying the environment and making things worse for the future. How let's take your take. Let's have your take on that, Professor Nnaji, and then we'll come back here to Abuja and talk to Professor Kabir Yusuf.
Like I said before in my opening salvo, there is no country that is an Eldorado. Every country has its own problems. This problem may be, associated with the crimes that are, carried out in those climes. But of course, Nigerian problem is indigenous, more or less. Because like I remember the chief of army staff said the other time, that most of these fighters are not Nigerians. So of course, that means that most of our boundaries are porous. So it goes beyond the military, the police. And in fact, it involves the immigration and the boundary authorities authorities to make sure that we know the type of people who are entering our territories, to be sure that these people are Nigerian nationals, because it will be very, very difficult for people who come from outside come and destroy our country, because if you love your country, you cannot destroy it. So I believe that they should check the nationalities of these persons to be sure that these people are not Nigerians. And if at all they are, there shouldn't be enough punitive measures, which I'm sure they're already in place. But these boundaries should not be porous to allow people who are not qualified to enter our country to enter, regardless of their race and color.
Right, let's hear your views on this, and I'd like you to tie in the bit about the environment, which has been destroyed by the activities of the bandits and insurgents, and of course the fact that this has also impacted on the country's efforts to feed itself. Now, in the 60 years that we've had independence, these are some of the serious challenges we have faced. But Nigerians ask, are we doing enough to surmount these challenges?
So you see, destroying the environment, killing people, and preventing people from the activities that will help them have their livelihood. All these things, they are part of the problems that we are having with this insurgency. And I would still go back to what makes someone a good Nigerian, that will prevent the person from joining either bandits or groups of insurgents and all of that. If, for example, I am to train my kid to become a good Muslim, for example, I know precisely what to tell him. Do 1, 2, 3, and that makes you a good Muslim. If my Christian friend wants to train his kid and tell him, I need you to be a good Christian, there are precise things you need to tell the kid. Do X, Y, Z, and you're a good Christian. What if I want to train my kid and tell him, I need you to be a good Nigerian? What are those things that I need to tell my kid? That if you do X, Y, Z, you are a good Nigerian. This is what we need to arrive at. Find that out and make sure that you include that in the curriculum. Primary school, secondary school, kids become good Nigerians. They wouldn't want to destroy the country. The problem here is that you have some people who feel marginalized in the way this country is being run, in the way things are done, and there's no way those people feeling marginalized would not want to react. And their reaction becomes bandits, it becomes insurgency, it becomes all sort of things. We have a number of development projects, development partners, and bringing fund to come and do things, and that is what they are targeting. And I think what they are doing is actually the job of the federal government. Come and find the groups in the society that are population of the country and the actual population of the people that are marginalized in the country, right? So what they are doing here is to demonstrate that this is possible, so that the government will come in and do more. So my approach when it comes to talking about insurgency is not to wait until insurgency happens and try to tame it. What you need to do is to prevent it from happening in the very beginning by carrying everyone along, right? Giving everyone that sense of belonging, that we belong to one big indivisible family that all of us love so much and cherish, that all of us want to promote, that all of us want to see it succeed, so that no one would feel left out, so that he won't come back and want to destroy it.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what Professor is just advocating is inclusive development.
Yes.
That's just it. Because our developmental initiatives are not inclusive. It has bred poverty on a mass scale. And the consequence of poverty is plural. All kinds of things we are talking about, insurgency, banditry, and all that. That's what we are grappling with right now. We must try to carry every Nigerian along. Policies must address the needs of all segments of society and all that. Education should be taken seriously, mass education. Otherwise, we are not going to be able to live in this country.
All right. So let's look at some other aspects of it. If we recall the president's broadcast, he did talk about asking ourselves the questions, the things that we have done right. I want us to look at some of the things we've done right. There have obviously been tremendous progress, and I want to come to your area, for instance, education. What it was in 1960, I raised this question all the time. In 1960, you didn't have that many people who had access and that many educational institutions. So that is something, isn't it?
That is something if we did not look at the context, right? How many people had access to education in the 1960s and what was the population in the 1960s? How many people have access to education today and what is the population today? In the 1960s, you're talking about 40, 60 million people.
56.
And now you're talking about 200 million people. We have about 10 million out-of-school kids in the north, and you go to areas where kids are not going to school and you want to blame the parents for not sending kids to school, and then you realize that there are not even schools in the communities. Schools are not even there, are not available, right? So when we are looking at people having access to education, we also need to look at the population at the time we're talking about. We need to look at whether there are availability of schools, and even when the schools are available, whether we have qualified teachers, right, and whether we have good facility to educate those kids, right? And even after we have all those things, then we still need to come back and look at the curriculum we are teaching those kids, whether this is a curriculum that will produce a kid that can be able to live in the 21st century and be productive in the 21st century, not just making kids memorize some numbers and some words and some, that will end up making them redundant and liabilities on the system. That
has been quite interesting. 60 years ago, and perhaps we can categorize them into three at the pace of 20 years. From 1960 to 1980, the educational system were highly functional. The boarding system, particularly at the primary level, had inculcated a sort of leadership structure, togetherness, understanding, common vision, and everything has been embedded in the structure of the secondary and the primary schools. And then from 1980s down to 2000, it had started to somehow degenerate as a result of the successive governments seeing the educational system as a liability, where we had started to experience a sort of distortion on the educational system. And then from the 2000 downward, we had started experiencing the proliferation of private sector in the educational system. Upon all this, when you calculated it, as my colleague had really observed, is it the quality or the quantity that matters? Are we in position to prepare this generation in the school system to address the immediate and future challenges that we were anticipating? Or are we just emphasizing on the normatives in the educational system for us to give much more emphasis on paper qualification rather than the merit where people often struggle? I think from 1960s to 1980, we never had a case of forged results, forged certificates, and even from 1980s down to mid-1990s, we had never experienced the issues of forgery, but from the mid-1990s up to date, we started experiencing it. What was that? It was as a result of that madness that were emphasized on paper qualification apart from what the individual will be in position to do. That is one aspect of the education. And then another aspect in the educational system is when we are talking about functional education, we need to have technical schools, we need to have teachers' colleges, we need to have craft schools that will prepare the middle class citizen. People do place emphasis on university education apart from monotechnics and polytechnics. Monotechnics and polytechnics prepare people to serve and man the middle layer of the economy. In a situation where the education at the university level is highly elitist and you train elites, and every year we are experiencing graduation of over 1 million people without corresponding job for these people to be absorbed, is going to be much more terrible and dangerous to the country. It is earlier the better that we take steps. And perhaps one of the steps that were taken by the government in addressing the issues by containing our students from going out to search for a job was to introduce entrepreneurship courses at the general studies level for the university undergraduate level, so that after their graduation, at least they were able to establish themselves, at least for them to mend before they get wherever they should be. But on the other sectors that support the education, particularly in the Northeast and in Borno State in particular, there is parallel education. That parallel education is the Sangaya school, that is the Almajiri school system. So now, the Almajiri school system have huge number of pupils and students than with the Western educational system. Successive efforts were made by the state government in persuading these children to be enrolled into primary school. Coupled with that, we had experienced insurgency. And with the insurgency, the Borno State government is now talking about more than 80,000 children that were unaccompanied, meaning these 80,000 children came to Maiduguri on their own when their communities were displaced. The state government had been building mega schools for them to be catered, for them to be trained. And in the process of the training, is it an integration between the Almajiri school system and the Western school system? Is it the 80,000 we are talking about live with the government? What about the Almajiri school system that had observed more than 300,000 unaccompanied children, that these Almajiri or Sangaya teachers were custodian of more than 300,000 children in their respective school system? What was the level of assessment by the Universal Basic Education in tandem with the Borno State Ministry of Education through the Ministry of Poverty Alleviation, Reconstruction, Resettlement, and Reintegration? So when these are harmonized, then from there we can contextualize the situation of our educational development. But overall, alhamdulillah, in Borno State, we have our own university independent, apart from the federal university. Yobe State, we had federal university, they have state university. So now, overall, in terms of structural development, universities are proliferating, private schools are coming on board, but what is more important is quality of those that are trained in these institutions, responding to the responsibilities of the circumstances on ground.
Professor Umara, thanks. And still speaking of education, some Nigerians have emphasized the need for the federal government to
Before the British imperialists arrived the shores of Nigeria in the early 19th century, Nigeria had two major types of education, basically religious in nature. In the Muslim communities in the north, Malams drilled children in the teachings of Quran and Arabic alphabets, while in the down south, Christian missionaries started primary education, which they managed according to their respective philosophies. In 1882, the colonial government brought Document Education Ordinance aimed at having total control in education. Again, in the early 20th century, the government began to build primary and secondary schools. By the time the British amalgamated Northern and Southern Protectorate in 1914, over 11 secondary schools were in operation. Although Nigeria celebrated her independence in 1960, the second half of 60s witnessed civil war that interrupted education in the eastern part of the country. Many successive governments and administrations have introduced numerous educational policies and programs to eradicate mass illiteracy. Universal free primary education, for instance, afforded many Nigerians opportunity to acquire Western education. In 1988, during General Babangida's regime, the old system of education was changed to 6334 system, which is still in use till date. All these programs were introduced to improve the quality and standard of education in the country.
Lack of funding of education has created so much trouble and so much disappointment in the educational sector. It was not like that after independence. The last time I checked, it was only 5% of the national budget that was given to education, which was horrible. UNESCO said that every country must budget 15 to 26% of their budget for education. Nigeria is not even coming very close to anything.
When you look at our standard of education, it is really going down by the day. We know that by the time in the 1960s and 70s, those who were there told us, they made us understand that if you finish primary school, you could read and write well, teach others. But today, we have graduates who cannot even defend secondary school certificate.
The State Commissioner for Education, Professor Uche Eze, assessing the sector enumerated conducive environment, provision of adequate facilities and equipment, and payment of workers' salaries as some of the efforts of government to improve the lot of education in the state.
State government has achieved a milestone in the education through the renovation of so many dilapidated classroom blocks and the construction of new ones. He has also emphasized the training and retraining of these teachers. He equipped almost all the secondary schools with computer labs.
It is the view of many that education should be given the largest chunk of budgetary allocation, as education tends to build the life wire of every nation. In Enugu, Chidinma Mado, NTA News.
Now, 60 years after independence, Nigeria has come a long way in many sectors. Of course, some have had mixed successes, and education is one such sector. Correspondent Olainka Uju looks at how the country's examination bodies have evolved to meet the aspirations of the citizens.
Nkwaba Linus is a visually impaired person who has been able to attain high level of education, a feat that was difficult to achieve in Nigeria in her early stage of independence.
Because I love the job, I would want to continue with it and do what is required.
That is exactly what Nigeria wants to achieve: provide education to all her citizens, irrespective of their status. This is in line with the fact that education is fundamental to the development of any nation and a catalyst for improving socio-economic well-being of the society. The education sector in Nigeria has had a checkered history, leading to what many describe as low quality.
In the 60s, the standards were high, and surprisingly, we are taught by teachers who went through what they call teachers' colleges. Curriculum was tailored to what we needed in our context. If I look at it to what is happening now, I say, where did we miss it?
Experts in the education sector have, however, agreed that the country's examination bodies have made significant improvement. It is all these that experts say shielded such bodies from feeling the heat of the COVID-19 pandemic, as ICT-driven measures came in handy and also drastically reduced sharp practices by candidates and their collaborators.
The truth of the matter is that funding mostly will always be the problem, but it shouldn't be the inhibition. It should not inhibit progress. At JAM, for example, we believe that even the government had to come to reduce the charges that we had, because we are using technology to reduce cost. And because we are using technology to reduce cost, and we are also trying to ensure efficient management of the resources.
The world is based on knowledge economy. We could deepen the application of technology to increase the competencies of assessors and increase the instruments of procedure to examine people.
21st century teaching goes beyond a teacher just standing in front of the children. The teacher is no longer seen as the sage on the stage. You are now seen as a facilitator of learning, and that's what we call technology-mediated learning.
While emphasis on acquisition of digital literary skills in the 21st century is applauded by many, the challenge of adequate funding and introduction of more innovative methods are suggested to propel the country into the path of development as it looks back at her 60 years of existence as a sovereign nation. Olainka Uju, NTA News.
Okay, let's return to our Maiduguri studio and speak to Ambassador Ahmed Shehu. who is Chairman, Network for Civil Society Organizations, Borno State. You've listened to a number of reports on the education sector. Surely Nigeria has made some progress and in 60 years of its independence. Yes, people point to many challenges and they talk about quality and quantity, but there is still some progress. What do you think about that?
Thank you very much. Coincidentally, I'm also educationist by profession. Actually, there are a lot of improvement from the education sector, as there is a transition from the conventional method of teaching to now use of the technology to transfer the knowledge and so on. But as we all know, as we clock 60, there's a lot of things for us to celebrate. Being as a nation, despite the civil war, despite the conflict, the insurgency, we are still united in that. But for the educational sector, I think we have the record in the world of being the best planners, as we all know. But when it comes to implementation, that is where we have some challenges. Looking at this from that educational perspective, our educational planners usually you have to pin out the NERDC, Nigeria Education Research and Development Council. How many times did they sit down to now research and then come up with innovative and then ways that it can be able to impact knowledge? For instance, there is this teaching method that was exported from India. The question is, why is the electricity for us to use the ICT? That is one question. And I'm sorry, I have to also respond to the issue raised by the JAM registrar. Okay, ICT I was introduced as a means for people to write their exam JAM. Okay, how many secondary schools have this knowledge about ICT? I know of a school who were asked, okay, you're going to write exam through computer. They don't even know how to operate the computer. So what I'm trying to say is there's a lot of improvement, but we need to be strategic and be innovative. There are a lot of innovative ways we can come up with toward ensuring that we transfer this knowledge effectively, that we can be able to use the available resources at our domain for us to see that we transfer the knowledge. Even the education sector, some of the values, some of the religion aspects, some of these issues that has to do with our curriculum that can transfer the citizen, the patriotism about corruption and other things. We do it at the national and international level. Most of those government agendas need to be packaged and then introduced into our curriculum. By that, we'll be producing citizens that are very productive, that are patriotic, that are sincere in all what they are doing. Our curriculums, they teach us, for instance, I used to joke with other people about, okay, our system tells us this is how to draw a frog and a label a frog, but what does a drawing of a frog add to the national economic at the end of the day? These are some pertinent questions that we really need to go back to the drawing board as we clock 60. It's no longer a drive for us to start thinking, teaching students how to do the drawing, cut the angles, Pythagoras theory. It's important at the long run, but actually the system, all the education sector need to be coordinated effectively so that we can have a comprehensive curriculum that can be able to address the needs in the country and that can be able to make the citizens to be more productive and that can be able to stand the test of time. I have to also link this issue to the youth, of which I am working closely with. Our curriculum do not factor what are the needs of the youth and what are those things that the youth need to be taught in the curriculum. At the last time I checked, I haven't seen anything. The curriculum should have aspects that will prepare the youth. My colleague here, professor, have emphasized about the issue of entrepreneurship in our universities as just a general studies. But in conventional other countries, what we needed to have is to start teaching the children from the junior secondary school level. Give them the mentoring, what do they want to become, and then all these things should be factored in the curriculum so that by the time they graduate from university, they're going to be a top-class masterpiece of their own. That is why when you see a Nigerian youth traveling outside the country, they make it as one of the best. Why? Because the educational system did not give them the opportunity, because the environment is not leveling. You want to send a report, and there's no light in your community for 3 days. What do you do? How do you start sending? You cannot send and then take it to the NIPOS as previously. So all these factors, there are relationship between all the necessary infrastructures that we need in the country and also the educational system. Thank you.
So much, Ambassador Ahmed Shehu, Chairman, Network for Civil Society Organizations, Borno State. And at this point, we'll also say a big thank you to Professor Ibrahim Umara of the University of Maiduguri. Both of them joined us from our Maiduguri studios. We'd like to thank you for your thoughts and contributions to this program. Thank you very much, gentlemen, and please enjoy the rest of your day. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thanks. Back here, quite a number of things were talked about, and functional education, entrepreneurship, and like the last speaker said, you know, the curriculum and what's in there for the youths. And these are things that even other nations are still grappling with, because if you hear people talk about falling standards, it's not peculiar to Nigeria. We've heard that in the Western nations as well.
We are living in a fast-changing world, and one has to be up to speed. Just like we said at the beginning, in the 40s, 50s, 60s, education was for you to occupy a position and contribute to the engine of society, engine of government functioning. Along the line, the government said, oh, we have to reorder it, 6334, to be able to lay emphasis on technical education to meet what we saw that time as a changing world. We didn't reckon with the digital world that was coming. You know, we seem not to be well prepared, even with the ingenuity of the average Nigerian, the intellect, the skills that we have. It's a challenge, which I know that the federal government has also observed. What they call keying into the digital economy. I think there is a desk for that. We have to do that. We are now confronted with two challenges. The 10 million children out of school, completely out of school. We're not talking about the digital education this time, completely out of school. And there are other people also. We have to lay emphasis on mass education first. And now look at the curriculum. What are we teaching? Everybody cannot be a university graduate, PhD holder. Those who have decided to go up there, what incentives are there? Research is almost a dormant aspect in Nigerian development now. Without research, where are we going to go to? No emphasis on science. Can you promote science without research? With special funding for it, waiting for results? We don't have that. So we are grappling with the mass illiteracy. We are grappling with the quality of education for people who are going to contribute to development. We are now so not supporting those who have distinguished themselves and are ready to research and make findings for us. They are not supported. So at various levels, we seem not to be doing very well. And I keep questioning. We have 3 tiers of government in Nigeria. We want to find out what the local government is doing, because they would have been able to be empowered to take care of this mass education at that level. And now before the secondary, the state governments moved to the next level, and now the federal government.
Well, since you speak of the subject, let me just explore it a little further and say, you think that there's too much concentration in the center? I mean, the citizens, expect so much from the center that we're not questioning just how much the states say keen into policies, and you think there's so much attention paid to what the federal does and not what the states are doing?
So much attention to the center, so much attention even to government as a whole, and much less attention to the kids that are learning themselves. I give you an example. If you have a 3-year-old kid that is used to playing with your phone, for example, from time to time touching the screen, give that kid a computer. The day you give that kid a computer, the kid will try to touch the screen of that computer. That kid is already telling you that since your phone is soft touch, your computer should be so. That means there's a problem there that needs to be solved. So what am I saying here is that, look, in the past we are asking kids in the schools, what do you want to become when you grow up? That is an obsolete question. You can't ask that question anymore. Probably the kind of profession you're thinking in your mind will not longer be available when that kid is a grown-up. Now what we should be asking is, what problem do you want to solve when you grow up? So that you will have a range of options. And from that, we should be able to develop a curriculum that can be able to answer those questions that our kids have now. Look, there's a realization that we need to have. All all this technology that we are seeing today, which we paid money to go and learn, and then so that we can be able to adapt to it, they are part of the culture of our kids. They are not part of knowledge. It is knowledge to us, is culture to them. They are going to grow up together with these things, and they are looking up to an opportunity to use them and solve all the problems that we might not have seen yet, right? So I think we need to kind of reduce the weight on this center. It is not about experts coming to sit down in a secluded place to craft a curriculum for kids. No, we should involve those kids. We have to be very revolutionary in the way we do this. Involve the kids, give them opportunity to bring the problems that they want to solve in the future, and involve them in what you're doing.
All right, let's take another trip to Enugu studio, and we're being joined by a new guest, Mr. Igbokwe Chukwuma Igbokwe, a public affairs analyst. Thanks for joining us on this special program. Hear me clearly? Well, you've listened to so many views espoused on this program since we started. We've gone into so many aspects of it: the political, education, security. And so let me start off with you by just saying, what are your thoughts on how Nigeria has been able to pull through in many of these sectors in 60 years of its independence?
Thank you very much. I would like to start by saying that I will join those who will say that irrespective of the fact that we have not gotten to where we are, I will say that we are making progress. But be it as it may, we have to understand that one, there are a lot of some uniqueness about Nigeria as a country that we need to understand. Because one, Nigeria is the most populous black country in the whole world. You don't get any of it again in Africa. Nigeria is a multi-tribal, multi-ethnic country. Nigeria is also a country that has experienced a military rule for over close to 30 years. And when we put this thing together, it will sum up to say that it has not been easy. It has not been easy in the fact that, judging from where we started, where we received, where we were tutored by the colonial masters, and at the stage we felt we are right to take over our own matter by ourselves. And on that ground, we will say that we were working. Only God knows what they mean by that, because you can only give what you have. But you can see that between the era of military in 1966 till we finally arrived in 1999 for another democratic dispensation, you will still see that even when we are taking off from 1999, we had to also stand on the base of the military in order for us to move. The two successive administrations we have had, maybe the President Olusegun Obasanjo and the present President Buhari that is successfully doing their second tenure, they are all former military men, and you know they are fully trained military men. So you can see that even the democracy we are trying to use to judge on how far we have gone, we can't say is a pure, we can't say it's a pure democracy, because at the end of the day, people who has had military training are driving the process of the democracy, of which is what we still have now. But let me put that aside and say that one good thing is Nigeria is still one. One good thing is that Nigerians have developed hard skin. One good thing, Nigerians are determined that whatever it is, they must survive. One good thing is that if any Nigeria gets to any nation outside this Nigeria, whether under hot or under cold, that person will survive. That is why you see that the leaders, our crop of major problem is leadership problem. It is leadership problem that have fueled ethnic crisis. It is leadership problem that have made our economic policies not to work. Sometimes deliberately, Because I know that when the system is working, those who are benefiting will not benefit. But Nigerians are good followers. All they need is to have a good leader. How we have passed this in, we don't have another country again of our own. When you change the education system, we adapt, Nigerians adapt. When you change the political terrain, Nigerians adapt. When you change other systems, Nigerians adapt. You can imagine that in Nigeria, a country that has, doused the whole world with Nollywood, we can't have Nollywood anywhere. There is no place called Nollywood. Nollywood is moving from one hotel to the other. But you go outside the country, you see what the Indians have done with their Bollywood, you see what the American has done with the Hollywood. Because of the leaders are not providing the adequate leadership. Because Nigerians are good followers. So we have been able to pass through this. We have been able to pass through this thick and thin. The conclusion was after 2015 that there will be no Nigeria. But Nigerians who still came out of it. Everywhere was heated up because our leaders know how to heat it up. Because they know they will always take our advantage of with the masses. Because they know they can always take us for granted. Whenever they want to create problem, whenever they want to have their way, they find a way of hitting the policy and they find a way of sending us to fight against ourselves. While they sit down and share their interests to their own benefit. So it has not been easy, but I'm saying that we have made progress from where we are. We have looked at the education sector, what we inherited from the whites, we couldn't sustain it. At a time that education was doing well, the government came and said, no, we'll take it away from the missionaries. And they took it away from missionaries and tried and see whether they can handle it. At the last, it came back to the missionaries. But before it came back, it was, it can never be the same again. And
So well, in all of this, you still acknowledge that having gone through all these challenges, country still remains one, and Nigerians, you say, have developed what you call the thick skin and survival instincts. Okay, at this point in time, we'll introduce another guest that has joined us, this time from Bauchi, and he is Professor Bala Suleiman Dalhat of ATBU Bauchi. And Prof, if you can hear me, welcome to this program. Let's just hear you so we can be sure that you can hear us loud and clear. Welcome to this program, Prof.
Yeah, Mr. Siristomo. I can hear you.
Okay, fine. Now, if you've listened to the contributions of our other guests, particularly of Mr. Ibukwe, Chukuma Ibukwe, who just joined us from Enugu, he's drawn attention to one aspect of Nigeria and Nigerians. Now, there is a joke going around, and they say, look, if you searched for the meaning of the word resilience in the dictionary and open to it, you'd find that it's a Nigerian. It means a Nigerian. And despite all what Nigeria has been through, it still remains as one country. And the Nigerian people say their middle name is resilience. We'd like you to comment on 60 years of Nigeria's independence and how Nigerians have adapted to the various challenges and surmounted them.
Let me quote the former Secretary General of the United Nations, Boutros Ghali. In a comment, he said, if God should have a nationality, definitely he's a Nigerian. Why? Because Nigeria is bedeviled with so many difficulties, diversities, and disparities. Nigeria is a very wonderful country, like the last speaker have just mentioned, that we have multi-ethnic, multi-regional, multi-religious, so many adjectives you can qualify, that Nigeria is bedeviled with all these things. And when you look at even the topography, the vegetation is different, the climate is different, the culture, tradition, and everything is different. And the major distinction is the education level. When you look at the southern part of the country, is dominated in terms of education. When you come to the northern part of the country, they are only blessed with some natural resources, mostly agricultural. with high level of ignorance, with high level of poverty per se. Yet, we accommodate each other. And despite the fact that most of our elites have made several efforts to see that they have done what is called a strategy, whereby corruption has eaten off deeply into the minds of an average Nigerian leader. Everyone that comes to complain will say, our problem in Nigeria is not the resources, rather it is just the leadership. Let me also quote Ms. Condoleezza Rice. When she came into the country sometimes around 2002-03, on her way, she was at Rwanda and Uganda. And when looking at the debt profile, she used the American influence to say, we have cancelled a significant portion of your debt. And the president then requested that let's also have a debt cancellation for Nigeria. But she said, never, because Nigeria is too rich to be poor in terms of resources, but it's too poor to be rich in terms of leadership or management of the resources available. So in that regard, she did agree to cancel the debts. Now, looking at our nature in this country, we have that citizenship that everyone is allowed to live wherever he or she wishes to remain, because we are citizens of the country. Now, if you come to the north, for instance, starting from Abuja down to Maiduguri, Taraba, and what have you, go and look at the level of investments made by the people from the southern part of the country. So anybody that is trying to say, let us divide the country along whichever line is just mischievously saying it. It's not actually meaning what he wants, because there is no any criteria upon which you can divide the country, because we have all accommodated ourselves. When we have the naturally endowed resources in the southern part, and we have efforts made by the northern part of the country, whereby most of the agricultural produce that are used in feeding the whole nation, including some countries in the West African sub-region, is coming from the northern part of the country. And most of the people that are trading these commodities, they come from the eastern part of the country. The northerners normally produces, and the trading is taking place by by people from other part of the country. So we are highly accommodating each other. It is not easy to govern Nigeria, because whenever we have a leader, if he attempts to take care of his own region, people start complaining that yes, because he's this and that. Take for instance, presently, the president of the country, if he make any effort to make appointments or to develop any part of the north, or to develop any part of the north that is predominantly Muslims, even the northerners within the country will still complain that yes, he has neglected our state because we are Christian-dominated north. He doesn't have any regard for us. And we are talking about marginalization. But what we should think of is, what value is the president adding? For instance, when you say, I'm going to build up a railway line that is going to link up maybe northern part of the country to Niger Republic, it's a welcome development when you look at the international trade that is taking place between Nigeria and Niger Republic. When you say, we're going to have a metropolitan train to ease transportation and to save our roads within the country or within our federal capital territory, it's a welcome development, but people will give it a different interpretation. So that issue of resilience, we have to be accommodating. When you go to Lagos, I know sometimes in 2019 there was a plea by some Igbos that they should be given the position of even a vice or a deputy governor in Lagos because of their population. That is to tell you that, yes, Lagos is a no man's land. It accommodates each and everybody from whatever part of the country. That is it. When we go to the north, take for instance, on Sundays there are businesses that will cease to operate in Kano, in Sokoto, in Katsina, and in many parts of the country. Why? Because it is people from the southern part of the country that are engaged in doing these things. We are endowed with a lot of resources, natural resources, agricultural resources, which requires a little effort. Unfortunately, that issue of lack of being proactive, one of the speakers said, we are good in making policies, we are good in designing, but implementation is a problem. And that is true of the matter. Take for instance, when you come to the northern part of the country, our pride is agriculture. And when your pride is agriculture, then you should be proactive. The rainy season commences usually from April, May, and it ends in October, November. But we are now in October. Up to this moment, there are some consignments of fertilizer and other herbicides that are not yet landed in the...
Well, Professor Bala Suleiman Delhat, we'll still ask you. We'll ask you to just pause a while here. We know that when we come to talk about the economy and how we've run the finances of this country, you would have a lot to say about it. But at this point in time, let's go back to our Enugu studio and speak to both Professor Jehu Onyekwere Nnaji and Mr. Igbokwe Chukuma Igbokwe to sum up their thoughts briefly, in spite of all what we have talked about on this program and in all other programs, and taking a cue from what the presidential broadcast was about on the 1st of October. What are you leaving Nigeria with at 60 years of independence? If we can have your brief roundup. Let's start off with Professor Onyekwere Nnaji.
Yes, it's very important to note that Nigeria has come through a long way. And if we look at the time from military to the civilian regimes, we discover that military was, endemic in Nigeria for over a period of, 29 years thereabouts. And the Nigerian democracy is about 21 years. So if we look at all these, we see that the Nigerian democracy is a nascent one, which is already just trying to take shape. But of course, in this area of education, we have suffered tremendously because education is the driving tool that drives every economy. And that is why the normal knowledge or the normal maxim is that knowledge is power. How do you get this knowledge? By acquiring it, by studying. And that is why the Roman scholar Cicero said that a room without book is like a body without a soul. So if we look at all these things, Nigeria should put in perspective all the things that have to do with education to encourage the students to study well. And of course, in this era of coronavirus, we have another problem on our hands. Most of the studies will be done at distant learning process, and we do not have the facilities. Most students don't have money to buy iPad, they don't have money to buy computers or electronic gadgets. Government should subsidize some of these things because in other climes, I think these things are done properly well, and students should access bursaries because it should be a choice for not going to school. So it should be somebody's right to acquire education, not because you don't have the finance. So government should aid the students because I believe that Nigerians are the best all over the world. Because when Nigerians leave the shores of this country and go elsewhere in Europe and the United States, we have been opportunity to lecture in the universities. And the Nigerians and their students are the best. So it is important that we should give them that leeway to showcase themselves properly, and we should market our potentials. And that's why I believe that Nigerians are doing well given the short period of democracy.
So very much, Professor Jehu Onyekwere Nnaji. And your closing thoughts, Mr. Chukuma Igbokwe, briefly.
Thank you. My closing thought is that looking at the address of the president on 1st October, it brought back hope again. But I want to say also that there need to be a follow-up because Nigerians, we are used to this, like the other person said, we are used to formulating policies, but implementing it is a problem. Each time a nationwide broadcast comes from a president like this, we celebrate it after reading it. But at the end of the day, it seems that we don't really get out these things implemented to the letter, because that is what is giving Nigerian hope. Nigerians are open, looking for when their leaders, any day their leaders get up and say, we are now ready to put things right. Nigerians are ready to follow. Nigerians are people who can forget the suffering they've had over the years and make more sacrifice. Just that they are making sacrifice over the increase in fuel pump price. Just that Nigerians also are making sacrifice in increase in electricity tariff. No matter how things are hard, Nigeria is looking for a leader that will give them leeway, that can lead the way, and we are ready to follow. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you to you too for joining us on this program. Thank you, and we wish you well in your other activities for the day. Thank you very much. Okay. Right. We're back here in Abuja, and we're still keeping Professor Mohammed Kabir Yusuf and Mr. Padi Ezeala here. One aspect which we have not talked about is a global challenge and how it has affected the fortunes of this country, even as we strive to move ahead. 60 years, we didn't think that we would have to deal with this global health issue, COVID-19, and that has further, exacerbated some of the problems. So, as we begin to wind down.
Well, it's a global challenge that has frightened and even embarrassed strong countries, big nations.
Yes.
So we have also not done badly in terms of our response. And again, whatever has made it not to spiral out of control in Nigeria, we thank that and also congratulate our fellow citizens on the front lines who have done very, very well. Now, nothing is going to remain the same anymore. It's for us to be able to walk the talk. We talk a lot of policies and all that. We have to move faster than we are moving before because we have already been dragged backwards by this pandemic. For you to catch up, then you have to redouble your efforts in terms of policy and ensuring that the policies are implemented. And the way we drive society, drive economies these days are not the way we did it 10 years, 20 years ago. It's a digital economy we are now. So what does it take to key into the global digital economy? We have to make sure, the professor has said it, we must make sure that the incentives are provided. I started hearing about diversification of economy since 1983 during the inauguration of President Shehu Shagari for second term. We all agreed the economy was going bad. I was 17 then. They said the economy was getting bad, we have to diversify. How many years today? We are still diversifying. You cannot visibly see, knowing fully well that oil is out of the question right now. So we have to make sure that we are fully prepared intellectually with necessary skills and the necessary capital to be able to meet into the current global dynamics, economically and otherwise.
All right. Let's head back to Bauchi and speak with Professor Bala Suleiman Dalhat, and we're winding down on this program now. So one of the things I'd like you to talk about is how the country quickly has been able to manage its finances, 60 years of its independence, and not knowing that something like COVID-19 will hit the world.
See, Nigerians in the past, they are so enthusiastic, they love the country, and they plan for the country to be great in the future. But future generations result into maybe being so high, so suboptimal, trying to make themselves rich and their families. The last week I talked about portfolio or diversification of the economic resource because oil is temporary. What is realistic is other sources of revenue. If you go to UK, they rely heavily on taxation. They manage their little resources and they take taxation to be a very good source of revenue. An average Nigerian dislikes paying tax because there is what is called the value for money. And if Nigeria have concentrated on adequate tax management and they were able to collect all collectibles, definitely if we have COVID 7 times, we wouldn't have suffered the way we are suffering now because what is due as tax to Nigeria is not actually being collected. And the monocultural economy, relying heavily on oil sector and stealing the oil money. That is what makes us to remain what we are. And to the extent that the debt profile of Nigeria is rising up to about 30 trillion or 31 trillion, it's very, very unfortunate for us to have that, despite all the resources that we have, that we can harness and take care of our resources. And over-dependence on the employment rather than being entrepreneurs. You see, when we have the abundant resources, we are supposed to have become job creators, not job seekers. Most of our graduates in all our institutions, if you go to the universities, over 100 universities, all graduates, when you ask them what do you want to be, they will tell you that they want to be employed. By who? By somebody. So a philosopher in China made an assertion that if you give a monkey a basket of banana and 100,000 naira, he will go for the banana. And note to him that $100,000 can acquire as many baskets of banana as possible. So also if you come to a typical Nigerian who is graduating, ask him what would you like to do? Is it business or job? He will rather take the job. So relying heavily on the government, that's why the burden is becoming so much. But business can create so many jobs. If you give somebody capital to be on his own, he can employ another person. But if you allow that person to have a job who you want to pay, some people categorize salary as a bribe given to an individual so that he will forget about his dream and ambition. So anybody who is on salary, no matter how part the salary is not actually having a good vision, because you are supposed to have created employment, not relying on the government. And today the burden is just too much.
Well, Professor Bala Suleiman Dalhat of ATBU Bauchi, would like to thank you for your contributions to this program. Thank you so very much, and we wish you well. Thank you once again. Okay, just a few more minutes to go, and let's round it off here in Abuja. And you've heard the final summation of the thoughts of all our guests. Well, all of them are united in one aspect, and that is, yes, it's been tough and rough, but we're still forging ahead as one country. And in his last comments there, he drew attention to one big issue that the country has grappled with in almost all of its 60 years of independence: corruption, and what it has done to managing the finances of this country. So, your closing thoughts.
Well, what all this told me is that Nigerians are still happy to be Nigerians, even though they are asking for more from the government, from themselves, from their communities, which is quite remarkable to me. I think it's true that resilience is our second name, and I love the fact that I'm Nigerian as well, right? But at the same time, even though I'm not an economist, but at the same time I realize that we can really do much better than we are doing right now with the resources that we have. And a very quick comparison with the countries with which we get independence at the same time or around the same time, and look at what they are doing. Look at India, look at Malaysia, look at Brazil, and how well they are doing for themselves. You can be able to tell that, yes, in Nigeria, if we have the right leadership, we can do much, much better than what we're doing right now. Probably one point I thought you would raise is the fact that Mr. President was comparing us with Saudi Arabia in terms of the oil price and all of that, which you did not. Even though I'm not an economist, I don't want to comment on that, but I still want to say that there are much better ways for Mr. President to address that to the nation. This is an Independence Day, and Mr. President has communication handlers, media group. I mean, it's not about telling us what makes sense and what doesn't make sense at this time in point.
Okay.
What it is about is telling us what will make us feel comfortable about that policy.
Okay. So, all in all, you say, yeah, you're still happy to be a Nigerian?
Very happy indeed. Yeah.
Well, we're happy to be Nigerians, but I must comment that with regard to the issue of corruption,
yes,
please, we have to lay more emphasis on bringing institutional structures and mechanisms to stop people from stealing our money, not necessarily going after them when they've already stolen the money. We must audit budget implementation before another budget is prepared.
Okay.
So we have to stop people from stealing our funds without, I mean, it's a simple thing to do.
All right.
Asking questions. We have to have agencies that ask questions. What have you done with our money? Before even the citizens start asking questions. You don't just filter public funds around and no institution asks you any question. What they now say is that they saw 1 billion naira in somebody's account, they go after that person. How did the 1 billion naira leave? So that is what you have to do. When we stop that, you can address other issues.
All right, thank you so very much, gentlemen. It's been interesting talking to you. This program put together as part of activities celebrating 60 years of Nigeria's independence. Professor Mohammed Kabir Yusuf, Mass Communication Department, Nile University, Abuja, thank you for being here.
Most welcome. Thank you for having me.
And Mr. Padi Iziala, Communications and Development Specialist, we appreciate your presence here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cyril.
Okay. And so we'd like to thank you all for being with us and hearing all the views of Nigerians as they mark 60 years of Nigeria's independence. We also like to say a big thank you to all our other guests who joined us from other stations, and that is why NTA is the network that it is. Well, we're not done yet, because coming right ahead after this is a special documentary. All stations are to stay on the network service for this documentary. It is called 60 Years of Nationhood, and it starts immediately after we sign off. Thank you for watching. I am Cyril Stober. continue to stay safe.
You may have heard the story time and time again. The story of Nigeria, a land of many tribes, languages, different views and different people. From the desert on the edge of the Sahara, through the cattle grazing pastures, to the mineral hills of the Central Plateau, down to the coast and the swamps of the River Niger. This is a land of beauty, and definitely a land with history.
I was quite conscious of the fact that, there was an event taking place in Nigeria around that time. And it was even made more dramatic. And they even, composed a song that we'll have to sing, as we'll be marching past on October 1st, at the parade ground. And I remember, for instance, that they said, oh, Nigeria, we healthy, we are independent. We have, acquired our independence from the British, and we are a happy country. Something of that nature.
From amalgamation in 1914, Nigeria, along with her diverse people and interests, consistently sought for good governance that meets ambition and complex peculiarities. 6 decades after independence, the country is rallying to fulfill our desire for development under democracy. It has been a complex journey with lots of learning curves. The pre-independent era was very productive for the colonialists. Cocoa in the west, palm kernel in the east, cotton, granite, items, skin in the north. These comparative advantages of the regions were carried over to the regional politics that characterized the First Republic.
Politics of the First Republic was based on federalism constructed around the 3 regional poles, subsequently 4 poles with the creation of the Midwest. And it involved controlling your region and then using regional power to project and control national power.
The regions were, during the First Republic, were large and they were productive. Productive not in terms of even, bringing, government services, but that, they were able to actually put in place policies that enabled people to, on their own, generate resources to run the government.
Creation. The country remained resilient. In 1979, the military government led by General Olusegun Obasanjo conducted elections and handed over power to the Shehu Shagari civilian administration. But it was short-lived
as the men in khaki bounced back for another stint between 1983 and 1999.
I, Olusegun Obasanjo.
Nigeria was once more on the democratic lane. Under the presidential system of government, separation of powers vertically among federal, state and local government, and horizontally amongst executive, legislature and judiciary flourished. But as players in the democratic exercise began to establish their turfs, it became apparent that reforms needed to be introduced.
When there are agreements and disagreements, it's a reflection of the crossfire of our political centripetal and centrifugal proclivities. This is not abnormal.
Critical to sustainable democracy is the concept of periodic elections, which to many political scholars are akin to life's blood. Elections, which are universally expected to be free, fair and credible, accord the people the power to enthrone a government of their choice while giving vitality and legitimacy to government. In the country's democratic experience, elections have variously been characterized by lots of shortcomings.
In 1999, relatively free and fair election. In 2003, there was heavy rigging by the incumbents. But this time around, Nigerians decided it was better to learn how to improve the system rather than push system collapse. Again, in 2007, the level of electoral fraud was very high, but once again, Nigerians as a people showed patience and continued the work to improve the quality and the integrity of the electoral process.
To make amends, President Umaru Musa Yar'Adua, who acknowledged the flaws of the process that brought him to power, instituted the Justice Uwais Electoral Reforms Committee that made a number of recommendations, some of which were implemented. When Goodluck Jonathan took over the mantle of leadership, some changes were made ahead of the 2011 elections. Significantly, Atairo Jega replaced Maurice Iwu as the head of the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC.
I believe we can do better than what we have met, but we don't just want a little qualitative improvement. We want a very good, perhaps good leap forward.
Jega oversaw the 2011 elections and did same for the 2015 elections. But it was the efforts in 2015 that proved critical in the nation's political history. Sweeping reforms were carried out, including registrations and updates of the voter register through electronic means. Others were the amendment of the 2010 Electoral Act, delineation of additional voting units, and the landmark use of card reader.
This had not been experienced before, and it had been resisted over many years, because the perpetrators of election rigging knew that it was a panacea. And it proved to be one, because in all parts of the country where the card reader was allowed to work, because there is evidence before the courts and everywhere that in parts of the country, south is south, the card reader was largely sabotaged. It was not allowed to work. But election was clean, reasonably clean in major parts of the country where the card reader was used.
But it was not just the electoral system that needed reform. but the politics and the polity as a whole. After 16 years rule and the first time in Nigeria's democratic experiment, opposition elements came together to unseat the ruling party.
The world has taken note of something that had never happened before, either in Nigeria or in Africa, that happened in 2015. And that is that political parties that control government came together in a merger, not a coalition, not an alliance.
We came together based on the fact that our perspective, I won't use the word ideology as such, our perspective of what was wrong about Nigeria was the same.
And today APC has brought a gospel of change, and that is not restricted to any particular aspect of life, but the totality of governance.
Nigerians had never anticipated the outcome of an election like they did in 2015. Fear grappled with hope, while desperations locked arms with common sense. Yet, in spite of the intrigues, Nigeria's democracy unfolded one of its best colors. The nation, not its political actors, emerged the winner.
Muhammadu Buhari of APC, having satisfied the requirements of the law and scored the highest number of votes, is hereby declared the winner and is returned elected.
It was the height of political maturity that brought on a new government and delivered heroes from both sides of the divide.
There was apprehension all over the country that Armageddon was about to descend on us. You know, well, the president, then president, had give it to him. He had the decency to say, I accept. Because even at that point, even when the numbers were against him, it was either or, would he or would he not go? So it brought a lot of relief, to the country and to the international community.
It tells whoever is in power that you should never take the people for granted. What happened in 2015 was like a revolt of the people. They revolted with their votes.
Why APC was able to win election at that point was different from the maturity of the politics that we are currently. Politically, Nigeria is not yet matured. Politically. But in terms of awareness of Nigerians wanting their votes to count, yes, we have moved forward.
The true worth of democracy lies in its legacy, policies and projects geared towards the socio-economic and political development of a country. Though basking in its longest uninterrupted stretch, the Nigerian democratic experience is still far off the euphorian destination. One area of particular interest and focus is the debate over national unity and cohesion. In spite of secessionist agitations in certain quarters, ethnic rivalry and clamor for national balance. Socialization breeds change, and as the political system evolved from pre-colonial Nigeria to the post-colonial era, so also did the social system. By 1960, most settlements in Nigeria could very easily be separated into clearly distinct social, cultural, and ethnic groups. The nation's founding fathers, aware of the changes, pursued the growth of a society with structures for balance in spite of the multiplicity of ethnic groups. With over 500 ethnic nationalities already existing in the period under review, a federal system of government was established to help create balance and foster unity amongst Nigeria's diverse population. But that political arrangement barely helped check rising tensions, which unfortunately culminated in the Civil War of 1967 and 1970. Ethnic politics, a negation of the principles which Nigeria aspired for in the immediate aftermath of independence, was at the core of the conflict. Years down the line, and Nigerians are still faced with the same questions bordering ethnic politics, sectionalism, and imperatives for inclusiveness in governance.
Asking these questions is a part of life, because you have to ask yourself, I have to ask myself, do I find fulfillment in my life as a priest? What the priesthood is now, is it what I bargained for? People who are married have to ask themselves the questions all the time. Did I marry the right woman? Did I marry the right man? Moments of flashes of happiness, flashes of sorrow. But on the whole, this conversation is very important because it's an endless search.
Politics drives the economy and drives everything else. It's all about competition for the control of power at the center, by a political party or by a section of the country, and so on and so forth. So it naturally breeds tension because those who are not in power feel disenfranchised, and those who have been in power have not shown the sufficient sort of breadth of leadership to say, I am president or a minister or whatever it is for the whole country.
Perhaps there is no one clear-cut and definite answer, but several. One fundamental thread links all of these answers, and that is the undeniable need for Nigeria's continued unity.
The issue of national integration is not a one-off affair. It's a process. It's part of the process of nation building. And it has been on since Nigeria came into being. Along the way, we have had a lot of challenges. There have been a lot of bumps. But at each of the points, we have crossed the Rubicon, and this country has come out stronger.
The process of nation building as a journey is one that recognizes the defects of the past and makes right the wrongs. In the context of social integration, most Nigerians are not blind to the fact that ethnicity can indeed be cooperative, embracing and positive.
I just say that our founding fathers, Nnamdi Azikiwe, Sedano of Sokoto, Obafemi Awolowo, I think they were more sensitive to our diversity, which they finally negotiated so that our diversity becomes a source of strength and a source of positive to move us forward as a nation, rather than a source of weakness and a source of tension and so on.
Still, most settlers residing in states outside of theirs are not oblivious of rising ethnic tensions in some parts of the country. The dangers, as many now say, is that what affects one part of the country is likely to affect all.
I don't see anything difference. We don't see anything difference between an Auchi person and we say stranger. We don't have strangers. Everybody in Auchi who is resident is an Auchi person. You ask for land, we give you land. If this were implicated into the protocol of ethical and moral servitude in this country, I don't see where anything is coming from.
Nigerians should stop thinking that we are the only ones who have had to make an effort to keep together. We are not the only ones. Practically every country that is as big as Nigeria and as diversified as Nigeria has had to make serious effort to keep together, to work together, and to build a nation. And I think the operative word here is building. You have to build a nation, and building requires effort, dogged effort, patience. We can say the same of the United States of America, or even Russia, or China, or India. All these big countries, they have to make effort to stay together and to work together.
Every member who professes a religion, every member from any region who speaks any language, we have the same problems as human beings. We have the same needs as human beings. We use the same roads, the same hospitals and everything. Now, if it advances as a nation, we are the beneficiaries, not a particular person, not a particular tribe, not a particular religion.
Staying together is a growing concern and the aspirations of Nigeria's many peoples. The different groups that make up Africa's most populous nation have come a long way. The country's indivisibility has always been the most viable option on the table for dialogue, no matter how dark the situation.
Nations are held together by institutions, certain institutions, and those institutions, some of them are tangible, some of them are not that tangible. For example, in the United States of America, people are held together by the sense of a constitution. In Britain, maybe the Queen to some extent, because they have no constitution. The question you ask about Nigeria is, what is the symbolic gesture that makes you feel that you are a Nigerian?
In search of the solutions for these challenges, what is your responsibility as a citizen? And what is mine? What is the responsibility of the leader? And the leader, by the leader, I don't mean me, just the president, but leader at every level. And what is mine as a follower? And also me too as a leader, either as a leader of my household, or as a leader of an agency, or as a leader at the school system, or as a leader at the market square, or as a leader, different levels of leadership. So, what kind of society are we looking at?
I think if things have been done correctly, all what is surfacing now wouldn't have, and because there's a policy failure, all along the line, that did not see the need to create institutions that people can believe in, institutions that can be a guidance to whatever I do, based on the rule of law. And if they have been in place, we will not be having most of the problem we are having.
The responsibility of leadership is to create a horizon of possibilities where young people can extend and expand the frontiers of their energy. A lot of Nigerians are not looking for government jobs. In any case, there's nowhere in the world where a federal government employs 5 or 10% of its citizens. It's not possible.
Nigerians are looking for equity. Equity. Do to others the way you treat others, the way you treat yourself. If there is anything that is is it difficult for Nigerian leaders to meet together and sort it out without resorting to all this discord we are having now.
Patriotism and love for the fatherland is buoyed by citizens' rights, civic obligations, and fundamentally by good governance. Building institutions to boost values that promote merit and encourage equity are critical components of a diverse nation like Nigeria. Unity may be a tough call, but it is Nigeria's destiny to achieve greatness as one united people.
Our diversity is our strength. We shouldn't encourage hate speeches. We should work with government, both at the federal level, to the state level, and even to the local level. We should realize that the future of this country lies in the hands of our youth. We should cater for them. They are the most active demography of the population. We shouldn't expose them to so many sensitive issues. We should try and cover our youth in various homes, and we should, above all, continue to pray for Nigeria.
But it takes vision, it takes courage, and it takes strong leadership that sees the future, visionary leadership that sees the future and said, that's where we're going to go. That's where I'm going to take my people.
And if you look around the world, there are examples of visionary leadership, selfless leadership. You know, the only satisfaction is that you are leading your people and leading them well.
From all ramifications, however, Africa's largest democracy begets the conviction of being on track. Time, the enduring neutral bystander, can only be an ally.